He tried to destroy my career. In whispers, I ended his, in silence. My name is Harper. I used to believe that if you worked hard and stayed kind, people would leave you alone. That belief lasted until my 3rd year teaching at Westfield High. I loved my classroom. I loved the quiet focus before a lesson began. The small victories when a student finally understood something difficult. The feeling that every day mattered. Teaching was never just a job to me. It was a promise I made to every student who walked through my door. Mr. Brennan taught in the classroom across the hall. Everyone adored him. He told jokes in meetings, brought snacks for staff, and remembered birthdays. Parents praised him. The principal trusted him. New teachers followed his advice like it was law. At first, he was friendly to me too. He complimented my lesson plans. He asked about my teaching style. He even observed one of my classes and told me I had real potential. Then, small changes began. A student mentioned hearing that my class was too chaotic. Another asked if I was leaving the school soon. One afternoon, a colleague gently asked if I was feeling overwhelmed. That was when I noticed something was wrong. But I did not yet know who had started the whispers. The first sign that something serious was happening appeared in the quarterly performance rankings. Every teacher received a summary showing student progress, test growth, and classroom evaluations. I had always ranked near the top. Not perfect, but steady, reliable. That quarter, my ranking dropped sharply. I stared at the numbers. Confused, my students had improved. Their test scores were higher than before. Their project work was stronger. I checked my gradebook twice. Everything matched my records, yet the official report told a different story. I assumed it was a mistake. Systems failed sometimes. Data could be entered wrong. I sent a polite email asking for clarification. The reply came quickly. The numbers, they said, had been verified. There was no error. I felt a strange chill. Soon after, the principal stopped by my classroom. The visit was casual, but her tone was careful. She asked how I was managing behavior. She asked if I needed support. She asked if I felt in control of my students. Nothing she said sounded like an accusation. But everything felt like doubt. That night, I reviewed my lesson plans again. Something was shifting around me. Rumors move quietly in a school. They slip through hallways like drafts of cold air. You do not see them, but you feel them everywhere. Students began acting differently. A few seemed nervous around me. Others tested limits they had never tested before. One asked if I was in trouble. Another asked if our class might be reassigned. I never showed confusion. I simply continued teaching. During lunch duty, a teacher mentioned hearing that parents were worried about discipline in my classroom. I smiled politely and thanked her for telling me. Inside, my thoughts raced. No parent had complained to me. Not one. Later, that week, I noticed something else. In a staff meeting, Mr. Brennan mentioned the importance of consistent classroom control. He spoke kindly, almost gently, but his eyes slid toward me for a brief moment. It was subtle. So subtle, most people would miss it, but I did not. After the meeting, he asked how I was doing. His voice was warm. His smile was supportive. He said he hoped I was not feeling stressed. That was the moment I understood. He was not just observing the storm, he was creating it. Once I suspected him, I watched more carefully. I paid attention to timing. Every rumour seemed to appear after certain conversations. Concerns from administration followed meetings where he spoke about teacher support. Parents asked unusual questions after events where he volunteered to coordinate communication. Nothing he did looked wrong. Each action seemed helpful, responsible, professional. That was what made it dangerous. If I accused him without proof, I would look paranoid. If I confronted him, he would deny everything, and everyone would believe him. He had charm, influence, trust. I had only my work. So, I made a decision that changed everything. I would not argue. I would not defend myself emotionally. I would not chase rumors. I would record reality. That night, I created a digital folder, then another, then several more, each labeled carefully. Lesson plans, student progress, parent communication, meeting notes. If whispers were his weapon, facts would be mine. I did not know how long this would take. I only knew one thing clearly. Truth needed structure, and I was going to build it piece by piece. I began with my classroom data. Every lesson received a detailed log. I recorded objectives, activities, assessment results, and student responses. I noted behavior patterns and engagement levels. I tracked improvement week by week. Nothing dramatic. Just precise truth. I redesigned my grading system to show growth clearly, before and after comparisons, skill development charts, written feedback summaries, everything time-stamped. Students noticed nothing unusual. I taught the same way I always had. Calmly, carefully, patiently. At home each evening, I organized records. I compared trends. I looked for inconsistencies between my documentation and official reports. Meanwhile, the whispers continued. A guidance counselor asked if I needed classroom management training. Another teacher offered me behavior strategy books, just in case. Each comment sounded supportive. Each felt rehearsed. I responded with gratitude every time. Mr. Brennan remained warm and encouraging. He praised my dedication publicly. He asked thoughtful questions in meetings. He recommended resources for teacher resilience. He was building a story about me. So I built evidence. Not loudly, not quickly, just steadily. The next step was communication records. I began saving every email connected to my classroom. Parent questions, administrative updates, curriculum discussions. Nothing was too small. I created folders by date and topic. I flagged messages that referenced performance concerns. I archived responses carefully. Then I started documenting parent feedback more actively. After conferences, I wrote summaries of conversations. When parents praised student improvement, I asked permission to keep written confirmation. Most were happy to provide it. They trusted me. That mattered more than they realized. At school events, I made a quiet effort to connect with families. I shared progress data. I explained learning goals. I answered questions openly. Trust grows when information is clear. The rumors did not stop, but something changed. Parents who knew me directly did not believe them. Mr. Brennan still smiled whenever we crossed paths. He asked how my situation was improving. His tone suggested concern, but his eyes watched closely, measuring my reactions. I gave him nothing. Just professionalism. Just calm. And more documentation. Staff meetings became the most important place to observe patterns. That was where narratives formed. That was where impressions became decisions. Our state allowed one-party consent recordings. I confirmed this carefully. Then I began recording meetings on my phone, always placed quietly beside my notebook. I did not record to trap anyone unfairly. I recorded to preserve accuracy. During discussions about student performance, Mr. Brennan often spoke with confidence. He mentioned trends. He suggested interventions. Occasionally, he referenced classrooms that needed monitoring, though he never said my name directly. Later, in private conversations, he spoke differently. Supportive, encouraging, understanding. The contrast mattered. I also noticed how administrators responded. They nodded when he spoke. They trusted his interpretation of events. Influence does not shout, it guides. After each meeting, I reviewed recordings and typed transcripts. I noted contradictions, dates, statements that shifted over time. The more I listened, the clearer the pattern became. He was shaping perception slowly, but perception can change. Records do not. Months passed. Nothing exploded. Nothing dramatic happened. That was the hardest part. Quiet strategies require patience most people cannot tolerate. My classroom thrived. Student projects improved. Test results rose steadily. Behavior incidents decreased. Every measurable indicator pointed upward. Official reports did not always reflect that progress. Sometimes numbers were delayed. Sometimes categories shifted. Sometimes comparisons seemed strangely selective. I never complained. I only documented. Emotion is loud. Evidence is patient. Colleagues continued offering gentle concern. Some avoided me more often now. Others watched with curiosity, as if waiting for confirmation of something they had been told. Mr. Brennan remained the same, friendly, helpful, respected. But I began noticing something else. He watched me too carefully. Whenever administration spoke with me, he seemed to know afterward. Whenever data reports were released, he asked subtle questions about my reaction. He wanted to see stress. He wanted to see defense. He never saw either. Because I was not reacting to rumors. I was preparing for truth. The semester ended with strong results in my classroom. Students met growth targets. Several exceeded them significantly. Parents sent messages thanking me for support and structure. Yet my evaluation summary contained cautious language, inconsistent classroom control, areas requiring monitoring. Recommend continued observation. The words were vague, but they carried weight. I requested clarification politely. The response was gentle but firm. Concerns existed. Patterns had been noted. Improvement was encouraged. I added the evaluation to my records. Then I compared it to measurable data. The difference was striking. Objective progress on one side, subjective concern on the other. Patterns were forming clearly now. Not just in his behavior. In institutional response, influence had spread beyond whispers. It had entered documentation. That realization did not frighten me. It focused me. If narratives could shape official records, then only structured evidence could reshape them. I expanded my system again. More detailed lesson reflections, more precise behavioral tracking, more cross-reference data comparisons. Truth needed to become impossible to ignore. Spring began, and with it came more direct administrative attention. Classroom observations increased. Walkthroughs became frequent. Each visit was polite, professional, and careful. I welcomed everyone. Before each observation, I prepared structured lesson outlines, showing measurable objectives. After each, I wrote reflection reports, comparing planned outcomes to observed results. When observers praised student engagement, I documented the comments. When they noted minor concerns, I documented those too. Neutral accuracy mattered. Meanwhile, something interesting happened. Students began performing even better during observations. They were proud of their work. They explained their thinking clearly. They demonstrated progress confidently. Good teaching is visible when students understand what they are doing. Mr. Brennan observed one of these sessions unofficially. He stood at the back, smiling gently. Afterward, he complimented my organization. He said improvement was encouraging. Encouraging. Not excellent. Not effective. Encouraging. Language reveals intention. I wrote down his exact words. Every detail mattered now. One afternoon, I reviewed transcripts from several staff meetings side by side. A pattern emerged that felt almost mathematical. Early in the year, Mr. Brennan had spoken generally about maintaining classroom structure. Later, he mentioned monitoring certain environments. Eventually, he referred to specific concerns that closely matched rumors about me. Each step built on the previous one, but something else appeared. In one meeting, he described behavior incidents that did not match my records. Dates were wrong. Details were different. Context was missing. Not lies exactly. Distortions. Subtle enough to seem believable. Significant enough to shape perception. I highlighted those moments carefully. Then I checked parent communication from those same time periods. Positive reports, no concerns, no discipline issues. The contradiction was clear. For the first time, I felt something close to certainty. This was not misunderstanding. This was strategy. And strategies leave trails when repeated often enough. By late spring, whispers had become assumptions. Not loud accusations, but quiet expectations. The principal began scheduling support check-ins. These meetings were professional and calm, but their purpose was clear. They were monitoring my stability. Each time, I arrived with organized data, student growth charts, behavior summaries, parent feedback, observation notes. Each time, the conversation shifted slightly. Questions softened. Concerns became less specific. Evidence changes tone even before it changes decisions. Still, no one openly challenged the narrative about me. It hovered in the background, unspoken but present. Mr. Brennan continued his gentle concern. He asked if I felt supported. He praised resilience. He offered advice about managing stress. He never accused. He never needed to. By then, the system carried his suggestions forward automatically. But systems respond to structured input, and mine was growing stronger every week. Near the end of the school year, something unexpected happened. A parent contacted administration directly to praise my classroom structure and student progress. The message was detailed and enthusiastic. Administration thanked the parent politely. Then they asked me to discuss classroom management strategies to ensure consistency with reported experiences. Reported experiences, plural. I understood what that meant. Stories existed that did not match reality. I added the parent message to my records. Then I began organizing everything into a comprehensive timeline. Rumors, meetings, data reports, observations, communication, every event placed in sequence. When arranged chronologically, the pattern was undeniable. Each negative perception appeared shortly after specific interactions involving Mr. Brennan. Correlation is not proof, but consistent correlation demands attention. I reviewed the timeline late into the night. By morning, I knew I was ready. I would not accuse him. I would request evaluation. Formal, professional, complete. Let the system examine everything, including him. The principal invited me to another support meeting early the next week. Her tone was kind but serious. She mentioned ongoing concerns about classroom stability. She suggested additional monitoring might be necessary next term. I listened carefully. Then I responded calmly. I requested a full, professional performance review. Not limited observation, not informal support. A complete evaluation of my teaching effectiveness, student outcomes, and classroom management based on documented evidence. She looked surprised. Most teachers avoid formal reviews when concerns exist. I welcomed one. I explained that clear evaluation would help align perception with measurable results. I offered to provide comprehensive documentation. After a long pause, she agreed. The review would take several weeks. Data would be examined. Observations conducted. Interviews scheduled. I thanked her sincerely. As I left the office, I passed Mr. Brennan in the hallway. He smiled warmly and asked how the meeting had gone. I told him everything was moving forward productively. That was true. He just did not know in which direction. Preparation for the review became my full focus. My documentation system transformed into structured evidence packages. Student achievement reports organized by skill progression. Behavior logs with comparative analysis across terms. Parent communication sorted by date and topic. Meeting transcripts highlighting relevant statements. Everything cross-referenced. Nothing exaggerated. Precision builds credibility. Observers visited my classroom several times. Each lesson followed clear objectives and measurable outcomes. Students explained their learning confidently. Engagement remained consistent. I did not perform differently. I simply allowed my normal teaching to be seen clearly. Meanwhile, review committees interviewed staff members. I knew Mr. Brennan would speak. I wondered what version of events he would present. I did not speculate. Speculation weakens focus. Instead, I reviewed my timeline again. Every claim about me had a documented context. Every context had supporting evidence. Truth was no longer scattered pieces. It was structure. The review team requested formal submission of my documentation, and this time the process felt heavier. Not routine, not procedural, intentional. I delivered everything in structured binders and mirrored digital folders. Each section was labelled clearly. Each claim was supported by dates, records, or measurable outcomes. Nothing depended on memory. Nothing depended on interpretation. They asked deeper questions now. How were discipline events verified? Who entered official performance data? Who attended meetings where classroom concerns were first discussed? The direction of their questions shifted. They were no longer just examining me. They were mapping the system around me. Then something unexpected happened. One evaluator asked if I had ever noticed changes in official reports after staff discussions. Not before, after I had. Quietly, I showed them side-by-side comparisons. Early draft summaries, later finalized versions. Small wording changes, slight emphasis shifts. Language soft enough to seem harmless, but consistent enough to shape perception. The room grew very still. Then they asked for the raw meeting recordings. All of them. Listening sessions lasted hours. The panel reviewed recordings chronologically. No skipping, no summarizing. Every word mattered. Tone mattered. Timing mattered even more. That was when the first real crack appeared. In one meeting, Mr. Brennan described a classroom disruption that supposedly required administrative attention. The date he gave did not match any recorded incident. Not in my logs, not in behavior reports, not in security records. It sounded believable when spoken casually, but recorded against documented timelines, it collapsed. The panel replayed that segment 3 times. Then, they requested incident reports from that week across the entire grade level, not just mine. That was new. Their scope was widening. Later that day, I noticed something else. Staff conversations had changed. People were quieter. Conversations stopped when certain administrators walked by. Attention had settled into the building like humidity before a storm. No announcement had been made, but everyone sensed movement, and Mr. Brennan stopped asking how I was doing. He started watching. The review committee called me back for clarification on timeline sequences. This time, their questions were sharper. They asked about earlier years, my first year teaching here. Then, the year before I arrived. Had I noticed other teachers struggling suddenly? Had anyone left unexpectedly? Had concerns ever appeared without clear cause? I had noticed patterns, but I had never connected them. At the time, I assumed normal workplace turnover, transfers, career changes, burnout. Now they asked for names. I gave them only what I could confirm publicly. Teachers who had been monitored heavily, then quietly moved, then rarely mentioned again. No conclusions, only facts. They exchanged looks I could not fully read. Then one member asked a question that changed everything. Did anyone ever warn you to be careful around him? I paused. Yes. A substitute teacher once told me, casually, that people who shine too fast tend to dim quickly here. At the time, I thought she meant workload pressure. Now I wondered if she meant something else entirely. A week later, something happened that nearly shattered everything I had built. A revised data summary appeared in the System 1 that showed declining engagement in my classroom over the previous month. The numbers did not match my records. They did not match observation reports. They did not match student work. But they were official. If accepted, they could weaken my entire evidence structure. My heart pounded when I saw it. Not panic, but urgency. Someone had updated performance inputs after the review began. That meant either error or interference. I did not confront anyone. I documented the change. Timestamp, version history, access logs. Then I submitted a discrepancy report directly to the review panel with supporting comparison charts showing the exact moment the numbers shifted. 2 hours later, system access records were requested for audit. By the end of the day, the altered summary disappeared, replaced by the original data. No explanation given. But something had just been exposed. Someone had tried to rewrite reality. After that incident, the investigation intensified sharply. Administrative archives were opened. not just current records, past ones. Performance histories, transfer notes, internal communications. Patterns spread wider than anyone expected. Several teachers, over the last 6 years, had experienced similar trajectories. Strong performance, subtle concerns raised, increased monitoring, reputation decline, quiet reassignment. Each case looked isolated until viewed together. And one common thread appeared repeatedly in meeting minutes, Mr. Brennan offering observations, recommendations, or contextual interpretations during early discussion stages. Always helpful, always measured, always influential, never directly responsible, but always present. When this pattern emerged, his absence from school became noticeable. At first, people assumed illness. Then, leave. Then, no one said anything at all. Silence grew thicker each day. Not peaceful silence, structural silence, the kind institutions create when decisions are already forming. I was called to present a final structured summary before the full evaluation panel. This time, the room was larger. District oversight representatives attended. Legal observers sat quietly along the wall. I presented my documentation exactly as before, but now with one additional layer. Version tracking. I demonstrated how performance narratives had evolved over time, not randomly, but directionally. Each change subtle, each shift reinforcing previous concern. Then I presented the altered data incident. System timestamps. Access chains. Reversion logs. No accusation. Only sequence. When I finished, no one spoke immediately. Then one district representative asked a single question. "Did you ever confront him?" I answered honestly. No, because confrontation creates denial. Records create exposure. Several heads nodded slowly. The meeting ended without formal statements, but I could feel something irreversible had happened. The structure of silence had broken. 2 days later, faculty received a short internal notice. Mr. Brennan was on administrative reassignment pending organizational restructuring. No details, no discussion. But information travels differently when uncertainty replaces admiration. Stories surfaced quietly. Memories resurfaced. Conversations reopened. One teacher recalled receiving strange feedback years ago that never aligned with her performance. Another remembered being advised to step back from leadership roles after positive evaluations. Individually, those moments once seemed minor. Together, they formed a shadow pattern. The whispers had never targeted only me. I was simply the first to document them completely. That realization changed how colleagues looked at me. Not with sympathy, with recognition. The official review results arrived in a sealed envelope. My performance record was cleared fully. More than cleared, formally commended for instructional excellence, data transparency, and professional stability under sustained review conditions. But attached to that letter was something unexpected. A procedural recommendation. The district would implement new safeguards for performance reporting accuracy, meeting documentation, and narrative verification before administrative action. My documentation had not just defended me, it had changed policy. For the first time since this began, emotion reached me, not anger, not triumph, relief. Structure had restored balance. Weeks passed. His classroom remained empty. A temporary teacher filled the space quietly. No farewell announcement was made. No public explanation offered. One afternoon, while organizing archived materials, I received an anonymous email. No greeting, no signature, just one line. Thank you for finishing what none of us could. Attached were 3 names, former teachers, who had left suddenly over past years. People I barely remembered. People whose careers had shifted without explanation. I never replied. But I added the message to my records. History deserved to remain documented. The year ended peacefully. Students presented final projects with pride. Parents thanked me for consistency. Classrooms felt steady again, not because conflict had never existed, but because truth had reorganized what silence once protected. I never celebrated his removal. There was nothing to celebrate, only correction. He had believed influence was power. He had believed reputation could outlast reality. But influence depends on memory. Memory fades. Documentation does not. He whispered carefully. I recorded quietly. He shaped perception. I preserved sequence. In the end, I did not defeat him. Structure did. And structure never raises its voice. It simply waits until truth becomes the only version left standing. People often think revenge must be loud to be real. They imagine shouting, confrontation, exposure in front of everyone. They imagine victory as something dramatic, something that shakes the room. But that is not how the deepest battles are won. Some wars are fought in silence. Some victories arrive without applause. Some justice happens so quietly that the world never even knows it was needed. I was never trying to destroy him. I was protecting what was true. And truth does not rush. It does not argue. It does not beg to be believed. It waits